Scrolling on social media, chances are that you've come across influencers claiming to make your life better. Maybe it's a mom breaking down her morning routine or a celebrity promoting their latest beauty product. Everyone wants to give advice, but almost no one was giving advice like Kat Torres. She claimed to have supernatural abilities. She said she heard a voice, and these abilities, she was willing to share them with you for a price. And that price, it was high. In the podcast, Don't Cross Kat, Chico Felitti investigates how the so-called life coach went from influencing people online to being charged with human trafficking and slavery. I'm Kathleen Goldhar, and this is Crime Story. Chico, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kathleen. It's a pleasure.
So, Chico, let's start with what you saw when you clicked on one of Kat's posts, mostly on Instagram. Am I right?
Her larger presence was on Instagram, indeed. She was this beautiful Barbie-like blonde model. So her kingdom, so to say, was Instagram. That's where she ruled, and that's where she amassed a large number of followers. I do remember seeing her profile back in the day, years prior to her being accused of crimes, and just not paying it any attention, just thinking, okay, another Brazilian influencer who's living a wealthy life in the U.S. and it's portraying this life of wealth in the U.S., been there, done that, okay, good enough, so I moved on. It took me years to realize that there was a big story there. No one saw that coming.
But a lot of people did click on her. How big a following did she have?
I mean, she was, let's say, middle-class influencer. So she had like about 200, 300,000 followers on Instagram, which is a lot. But we're talking about Brazil, and we're insane about social media. So we do have influencers who amassed a following of 50 million or 60 million followers. So 300,000 is something, it's noticeable, but it's far from being like this nationwide phenomenon. So she was, I would say, in the middle class of the internet.
And just expand a little bit more on what people found appealing about her. What would they go to her for? What was she trying to tell them she could help them with?
In short, I think she was selling two things. The first thing, she was selling the American dream. So she was this young and beautiful Brazilian model who had made it in the U.S., and she showed that she had made it in the U.S. by posing in fancy hotels. She was taking selfies at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills. She was posing with Ferraris, showing her shopping sprees. And on the other side, she was also selling a lot of self-improvement, like the basic stuff. She wasn't making anything up. She wasn't creating anything, but she was well into the New York Times best-selling self-improvement books. She was reading them all and kind of digesting them and translating them into Portuguese. So there was a lot of meditation, there was a lot of mood boards or projective boards. And I'm not that much into that world, but yeah, she was selling stuff Oprah sells. She was selling self-improvement and wealth in American.
But she also had that kind of supernatural she promoted that she had some supernatural abilities.
That came in time. Yeah, that came in time. At first, she was very basic. She was very, very vanilla in what she was offering. But eventually, she starts revealing to her audience that she had superpowers, that she had been gifted with a voice since her childhood, that she was able to talk to an entity, which she then started calling God or the alien. So she had several phases. And then she started claiming she could do witchcraft. She could change anyone's life with her powers as long as you paid her for sessions. She could change your business career. She could make your dreams come true. That was what she eventually started selling to her followers, using her superpowers.
And her life changed from her childhood. Can you tell me about sort of what she sold as her life narrative, her arc, before the downfall?
It's a very interesting arc because she is indeed a rags to riches story. She came from this poor family. And when I say poor, I mean Brazilian poor, which is poor. It's different from American poor or European poor or a family who had a hard time putting food on the table, like from really poor regions of Brazil, moving a lot. Her father was an alcoholic. He was a violent man. And eventually she moves to Europe at a very young age, at 16 or 17 years old, and starts modeling in Europe. And eventually is photographed with Leonardo DiCaprio in a nightclub in Cannes, France. So there was something there. It was a princess-like story. She had made it, and she eventually moves to the US, where she gets important gigs in show business. She's part of a video clip of the Fast and Furious franchise. She gets her picture on a billboard on Sunset Boulevard for a bikini brand and a water brand. So she makes it. For Brazilian standards, she had made it. She had achieved a lot. So therefore, people admired her, especially young Brazilian women who shared the dream of making it in the US, of making money in dollars and being rich. So she had an actual story that was remarkable. She had achieved a lot.
You speak to people who are victims of CAT, including a woman named Desiree. Who is Desiree?
So Desiree is this really young Brazilian woman who had battled cancer, who was a cancer survivor and lived in Canada. She lived in Vancouver, where she waited tables and she had low-paying jobs. So she starts getting fascinated with CAT's lure of making it in America and starts approaching CAT. She's also really into the mystical aspect of it. So she starts paying CAT for consultations. She would pay $200, which is a lot of money in Brazil. It's actually the minimum monthly wage in Brazil, $200. So for one 45-minute session, she would pay the equivalent of a Brazilian monthly minimum wage. So she starts seeing CAT more and more and paying more for these consultations. And she gets lured into CAT's power. CAT starts deciding things. First at counseling, like, you shouldn't be with this guy. This guy is not man enough for you. You have to get a wealthier man. You have to get an older man. The voice tells me that you have to get an older man who will provide to you, and you deserve something better. And she actually follows CAT's instructions up to the point where she disappears, and her friends start worrying because she was then living in Germany because she had married a German man, and she flees Germany, and her friends start worrying that she might have abandoned her life to live with CAT. And that was precisely the case. She had flown to the US. She had gone to a suburb of Austin, Texas, to live with the influencer she admired so much, she idolized.
And people don't realize that until, I guess, Desiree shows up in CAT's Instagram.
They do have a hunch. They do find it suspicious, but they cannot prove it. And then it's such a enticing story that it becomes viral on Brazilian Twitter, and people all over the country start investigating, especially young women. The same young women who could be CAT's followers were the same young women who investigated the story and helped solving this case. So there are hundreds of young Brazilian women investigating the case and trying to prove that Desiree was actually living with this influencer in the US until they get it right. They're able to prove that Desiree is living with CAT because they apply so much pressure. They call the Texans police. They have wellness checks on Torres' house. They manage to find CAT Torres' address. And eventually Desiree shows up in CAT's social media, proving that she was living with CAT Torres. She was living with this big influencer she idolized, and she had moved, and she had given up on all of her life, and she had given up on her relationship and job to live with this influencer she followed on Instagram.
What made them think that that wasn't anything other than, she's an adult, she can go and decide to change her life and go live with even her guru, right? So what made them feel that there was something problematic that they needed to sort of investigate?
I do think there were clear signs of human trafficking in the sense that she had cut ties with her family and friends. She just ignored everyone. She stopped responding messages. She stopped talking to people who were close to her for decades. So that is very troubling for someone who's close to you. And also the fact that her behavior changed. In the few scarce times she would reply to messages, she would be very aggressive, and she would start mimicking Kat's words. They realized that she was writing or talking like Kat Torres did. That's what I think made them look for the police and look for an investigation of what was really going on in Texas.
And what did you find out that Desiree was doing in the house?
At first, she moves to the U.S. with the promise of helping Kat. Kat reaches out to her and says, I'm in a bad place. I'm thinking of harming myself. I need someone close to me. I'm so lonely here. I'm buying you a ticket. That's how she moves from Germany, where she was living, to the U.S. So she claims that she had accepted to go to the U.S. to help a friend, to help the influencer she loved so much. When she gets there, Kat starts insisting that they need to make money together because they need to open a spa together. They need to start a holistic business together in Texas, but they need the resources to do so. So Kat Torres starts insisting that Desiree works for the money, and she has a clear sense of what Desiree has to do to amass that amount of money. They needed hundreds of thousands of dollars. So Kat Torres starts suggesting at first that Desiree dances in strip clubs and eventually starts doing sex work.
There's also a point where it seems as though Kat is sort of losing her grip on reality, right? Like she does sort of start to seem a little bit off. Kat says she's been kidnapped by the Russians. There's all this kind of stuff going on. So while we're seeing Desiree shift, we're also seeing Kat shift a little bit. Can you talk to me about what's happening there?
It's a very interesting layer to the story, which is Kat starts using ayahuasca, which is a sacred tea in some regions of Brazil for some native Brazilians. It's a tea made out of roots of plants that grow in the Amazon forest, and it makes one hallucinate, and it's used in rituals. But when Kat is living in Los Angeles, she starts attending these parties in a mansion with A-listers, with people who are Hollywood directors, Hollywood actors, and like really important people in Los Angeles who take part in parties where people drink ayahuasca. I'm not calling them ceremonies because they're not native Brazilians. So I wouldn't say they're ceremonies. I would say it's a recreational usage of a sacred tea, which is legal in Brazil and it's not legal elsewhere in the world. It's legal in Brazil because it belongs to a culture. It belongs to those native people. So Kat starts attending these parties at a beautiful, beautiful mansion. I've been to that mansion filled with Oscar statuettes, and starts using the tea and starts hallucinating. We cannot state that she changed because of the tea, but she starts acting in irrational ways. So she starts saying that she talks to aliens, that she's able to read her followers' minds, that she's able to detach her soul from her body at night and visit her followers. And she starts stating all of that on her social media. So there is a change there. She was doing well in the US. She was making money. She had people paying for consultations. But she gains a new personality, which is a witch or a deity. She even sometimes says she's God herself.
Yeah. And Desiree's not the only woman in the house, right? There are other followers that have joined.
Followers with different stories. At one point, there are 3 different followers living in the house. Another one has a similar backstory to Desiree. She was living in the countryside of Brazil, really poor family. She sold candy to get enough money to buy a ticket to go to Texas, like really hard upbringing. When she gets there, Kat also instructs her to do striptease at clubs and start working with sex work. And there's also a third follower who wasn't that much keen of Kat. She wasn't an actual follower. She just was living in the US undocumented and was about to become homeless. And she saw an opportunity in living with Kat to get a place to eat and to get back on her feet. So Kat suggests her to strip or to do sex work. She doesn't buy into it. She just says no. So she starts cleaning Kat's house and driving all the women around. But she only lives there for 4 or 5 weeks and decides to leave without getting any payment. Whereas the two followers who were really into the cult of Kat Torres really saw Kat as a guru, stay for months. And they do oblige with everything she says. If the voice says you need to go to a striptease club and work for 14-hour shifts, they would do so. The voice now says that you have to work with sex work. You have to start selling your body to 3, 4, 5 men a day. They will say so because they believe in Kat's powers and they also fear Kat. Kat also threatens them. She says the voice will retaliate if they don't do what the voice tells them to do.
And that's why you call it a cult. You just said the cult of Kat. That's sort of where your belief is that this became a cult of one.
I think it's safe to state that it was a cult. It was a small cult of 3 people, like physically, but she did have many followers who were in the cult-like mind across Brazil. So you have people who paid her tens of thousands of dollars. One of the most touching interviews we had for this series was with a woman who sold her parents' house to pay Kat $20,000. Her dream in life was to publish a book. And Kat says, I can get your book published and it will be a bestseller, but you have to pay me. So she sells her mom's house to wire Kat $20,000 to get her publishing deal, which never comes true.
I was just about to say, I'm guessing that didn't happen.
No, that didn't go through.
What's the beginning of the end for them? What happens that sort of shows you now in hindsight that this was going to crash?
I think what is very peculiar about this case and about Don't Cross Kat as a podcast is that I think this crime was only uncovered thanks to armchair detectives, thanks to this big pressure that builds online. We tend to think of people on Twitter or on social media and true crime fans as somewhat of an annoyance. But in this case, they are the actual heroes. Like young women who were obsessed with this case, they saved the day. They start calling the police and calling the American police and applying pressure and saying, something's off. You have to go there again. You have to go there again. They're not well. They're not there on free will. They're being held captive. So something shifts thanks to the people who investigate this case online. It's not a case that was solved by the police. It's not a case that was solved by the FBI. It's not a case that was solved by the Brazilian Federal Police. It's a case that was solved thanks to armchair detectives in Brazil.
You know, it's not the first story we've even done on this show, but it happens. Like, it really does happen that these people get so involved and they have more time than the police. Like, police have other issues to deal with. These guys get obsessed and then they can spend all their time and they really do figure this stuff out.
There's a very touching aspect to it, which is Patty, who was one of Desiree's best friends. She's the one that is the most invested in solving this case because she loves her friend. She's concerned about her friend and she wants her friend back. And that's what the podcast narrates. The story of 2 friends, one of them goes missing and the other one's had a consultation with Kat and she was like, what kind of white nonsense is this? And never came back. Whereas Desiree was really interested in growing more and more interested. So when Desiree disappears, Patty really begins a quest to find her friend and it makes a difference. I think we're very numb as a society and we think we're not able to make a difference as one individuals, but this story shows that one individual can make so much difference.
So Kat and Desiree eventually go on the run. Can you tell me about that?
The Texas police start showing up at their house more and more. Like this beautiful American suburban house with white fences and a manicured lawn. And Kat starts showing concern because she's never concerned. She always says that people on the internet are haters and they envy her. And so that was her approach at first of people asking her questions and telling her that she was committing a crime. But then when the American police gets more and more involved, she starts getting concerned and tells her followers at this stage, there are only 2 followers living with her, She says, we have to get away. So they start going to different Airbnbs in different places of the US. They go to Florida, they go to Maine, they go to several places, and she makes them buy wigs and sunglasses to disguise themselves. It's kind of a jazzy scape. It's not a very well architectured scape. They're learning it as they go to tell it. It's even hard telling the story because it's not very rational, but they try to escape, and she's still insisting that they have to be involved in sex work so they can make a living, so they can support themselves. So she would be like, no, you have to change your face. You have to put on a wig and keep on working because we need the money. So they go to 2 or 3 different locations in the US trying to escape the police, but eventually they get caught in Maine and they're all arrested.
Does Kat ever engage in sex work, or does she just tell the others to do it?
She doesn't.
Yeah. So they get arrested, and what happens? What do the police do with Kat?
Human trafficking is a very hard crime to define, because if the victims are stating that they were there by their own free will and there's nothing wrong, it's hard to accuse someone of doing something. But once they're arrested in the US, they start regaining their autonomy and they start realizing they had been trafficked. So there's a very telling scene in which Desiree is in jail and she sees a poster of the signs of human trafficking. And they're listed there, and she starts reading them one by one. And she's like, okay, I did not have my passport. Okay, I did not have the money I was being paid. Okay, I felt pressured or threatened, maybe. And then she comes to the hard realization she had been trafficked. And she admits to the police that she had been a victim of human trafficking. So Kat can be charged and deported to Brazil, where she's charged with accounts of human trafficking. And eventually she gets convicted.
And where is she now?
She's currently at a federal prison near Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Think of American prisons. Think of the American system. It's 10 times worse. The conditions are really subhumane. They shouldn't be like that, but Brazilian jails are among the worst in the world.
And how many years is she in there?
She was convicted for 8 years in the first account of Desiree's crimes committed against Desiree. And now there's another trial being held. So chances are she will have at least 15 years of jail time to serve.
Do you think that Kat believed her own specialness, or was it a straight up con? Or were we talking about mental health issues? What are we talking about when we think about what Kat did?
It's complicated, but after interviewing many people who were close to her, including her former husband, she seemed to believe the thing she was selling. Because we're not talking about a multi-millionaire scam here. We're talking about 2 victims. We're talking about a couple $100,000, and she was making decent money without committing crimes. So it's not logical that she would change one thing for the other. She would take the risk. The stakes were so high of trafficking people and forcing people into sex work and forcing people into stripping in strip clubs. She wasn't making tens of millions of dollars. I would say she could have made the same money being a model, being like in Hollywood productions, or even marrying a wealthy man. There were plenty of wealthy American men who would happily marry her. So she could have achieved that level of wealth, not breaking the law, but she decides to break the law. Her former husband says something very interesting, that she really believed she was helping these young women out because she was teaching them what she had done in life. So she had this journey of getting to be someone by using her body and by using her sexiness. And she thought of that as the only way out. So she was just reproducing the life she had led to teaching these women to do the same. I mean, there's some truth to it. She was only able to escape poverty and to escape domestic violence thanks to her beauty. So she really believed that women could only make it if they used their beauty and they used their youth and they used their bodies to achieve something.
I guess there's also, though, the idea that there's something very addictive about power and followers, right? I mean, if you're a model in Hollywood and you're a B-level model, that's not a lot of power. It might be more money. Even marrying a rich man might be money, but there's not a lot of power behind that. Whereas this gave her a much different sense of herself.
I think the term influencer says a lot. She had influence over people, and that is addictive. And she had real influence. She made people move to the US when she requested. It's not like they're not telling you to buy gummy bears. They're telling you to quit your life and live with you. And people were gladly doing so. So I do think there's an aspect as well of the power of influence. I think people get drunk and get high on influence. And Torres certainly did get high on influence.
How are Patty and Desiree doing? I mean, this was Patty's effort to get her friend back.
It was. And the thing is, they are in touch. Their relationship is not the same. Their friendship is not the same. They talk very scarcely, text once a year or twice a year. And Patty really hopes that she's mending their relationship. But they've been through a lot. There's a certain point in which Torres doxes Patty's information. So Torres publishes in her Instagram stories Patty's address, Patty's children's names, Patty's children's pictures, Patty's phone number. And Patty knows that the only person who had such information was Desiree. So there was a certain level of betrayal. So Patty felt betrayal. A crime was committed. That's also a crime. Doxing someone, sharing someone's private information for hundreds of people to see, millions of people to see, is also a crime. So there's a lot of mending to do, but they're in good terms. They're not in the same friendship they had before, but there's an effort, which is very poetic and very beautiful. Both of them are really trying. Desiree is still healing. She's currently out of social media. She's out of any kind of social interaction, but they're giving it a go. They're trying.
Good. Well, Chico, thank you. It's a real pleasure to meet you. And thank you for bringing up this really interesting story. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Sure, my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Crime Story. If you enjoyed this conversation, you should check out our episode with Scott Johnson. I spoke to him about the Hollywood con queen, a con artist who impersonated Hollywood executives in order to lure people to Indonesia. That conversation is linked in the episode description. Crime Story is hosted by me, Kathleen Goldhar. Our producers are Nikki Manfredi and Hadil Abdelnabi. Sound design by Julian Uzieli and Graham McDonald. Our senior producer is Jeff Turner. Our video producer is Evan Agard, and our YouTube producer is John Lee. Executive producers are Cecil Fernandez and Chris Oak. Tanya Springer is the senior manager of CBC Podcasts, and Arif Noorani is the director of CBC Podcasts.